Morning, morning, morning. Good morning. Good morning to you.
12 minutes now after 7 o'clock, and it's time for us to Let's Talk HR with HRMAB. Joining us this morning to do so is Shane Howell, who is a Human Resources Strategy Consultant and the past president of HRMAB. With him right there smiling is Kadisha Haynes, Developing Human Resources Professional. Good morning, both of you.
Good morning,
Good
Pearson.
morning.
I want to look at this
Good
subject
morning,
of recruitment, which can either make or break any organization, and taking recruitment seriously is absolutely vital to how the business really gets going. So let's define what recruitment is. Kadisha, can you take this one? Explain to all of us, what is recruitment?
So, recruitment is essentially the process of finding and hiring the best talent for a job opening, and it has about 6 key phases, which are preparing, sourcing, screening, selecting, hiring, and then the onboarding process.
That's a lot. That's truly a lot.
It is.
And whereas once upon a time it was someone sending in a letter saying, I'd like to have X position, you come meet with someone and you got the job. It's vastly different today, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
What's the difference?
So, traditionally, as you mentioned, recruitment was paper-based. People would post an ad in the newspaper, and then you would apply, or you would go in person, or you would mail in your application. But today, with the introduction of the World Wide Web, you have applications that are coming in online because the process is fully digitized. No one is sending in a physical application like before. And also, before where recruitment was just that paper-based assessment, you have a bunch of different tools that hiring managers can use in order to help assess the best fit, because we spoke about having the best talent for the role. So as part of your recruitment process, you might have persons know, in addition to sending the application, they may have to submit a work sample to show that you have the skills that the employer is looking for. And you might also have to do psychometric assessments. You might be asked for a portfolio. You might also be asked to come in and do some work to kind of job shadow. And all of that could be part of the process now, where before you just submitted a piece of paper with your resume on it, essentially, and that was it. But now it's way more dynamic.
You know, Shane, and it's that dynamism we're talking about, because there's so many different layers and levels to recruitment. As an entry point, fine. But within, even once you're in, there are other different levels of recruitment too for different positions. So let's talk a little bit about that. You know, how do you as an HR professional ensure that, you know, that you are on top of what it requires so that you make the best selection of the best candidate at the given time?
Okay, so great question, Pearson. I think where we started is normally looking at the job in itself and identifying what is critical for that particular role. What are some of the key skills? What are the competencies that we need? Essentially, what do we need the person to be able to do really, really well? Ultimately, when you look at a job description, there may be a slew of different things. You might see 20 different bullet points on your job description. But we know in reality that it's maybe 5 to 7 of those things that you need to be excellent at doing because they really generate the greatest value. So we start there and then build out a process, kind of as Khadija was just saying, that helps us to tease out who is the right candidate, who is the best fit candidate to that role, whether that be an external candidate or an internal candidate. I think one of the things, and this applies to both external and internal, is that we've all gotten accustomed to the interview. And that interview could go several different ways. So it could be
Yes.
very structured, where every candidate is getting the same set of questions, and then there's the unstructured and semi-structured. Unstructured, where Pearson walks in, I ask him A, B, C, and D. Khadija
Mm-hmm.
walks in, I've decided I want to ask her E, F, G, and H.
Mm-hmm.
And the problem with that is that it means I'm not comparing apples with apples necessarily, because I've now introduced two different sets of stimuli to the candidates. So I think for us, it's really about trying to improve the process I don't want to say standardize it in a way that it is too rigid, but can we tease out the things that we really want to tease out? So we still use interviews, but as Khadijah said, we know you would find that maybe employers require you to come in and so let's say a journalist is coming in, just as you're doing this interview with us, and I was recruiting a journalist, I may want them to do a mock interview in that interview setting. I may know that I need a person to work under a high stress environment or one where they need to think very quickly. So I might have a psychometric test or some other type of test to replicate that type of experience so that ultimately I'm not solely going by you saying you can present or you can interview, but you've displayed that you can interview. So that helps to kind of remove the bias and the discrimination that can creep into the recruitment process.
But can you tease out my character in the interview process? Because my character must also fit the brand that I'm applying for. Can you really assess who I am, regardless of my technical skills, so that you can decide whether or not I am the best fit?
Great. So that is where the process expands even beyond the testing that we do. So there are certain things that can come out in the psychometric assessment. So just to kind of give a bit of context as to what a psychometric assessment is, you have assessment, that can test personality traits, cognitive ability, your interest, what are you naturally interested in, and certain other elements of character traits, your level of integrity, how do you feel about, let's say, stealing at work? What do you characterize as stealing at work? Whether that be actual items or time or otherwise. So there are tests that are in place that can help to start to reveal perspectives that will give a sense of character. But then beyond that, remember that we still have within our toolbox reference checks, background checks. So reference checks will involve, checking with past employers. How did Shane show up at work? What type of individual was he? Was he aggressive? Was he, did he get along with his teammates? Did he respect management? Did he get to work on time? There are background checks, which are even more intimate, so to speak, and that's primarily limited to certain roles or levels in the organization. Where a company may do a credit check to see what your background looks like, or they may do a community check where they have persons essentially get a sense for, how does this person show up on a daily basis in their community. And then finally, you have the police certificate of character, which I know can be topical at times for different reasons, but that is another way. So there's several different data points essentially that we can capture to start to show and reveal the individual who's kind of sitting before us for that interview, well, for that vacant role.
So, Kadisha, why all of that? I mean, it's just a job, some would say. You're just looking for a human being to do a thing, you pay them, they go home, and they come back and they do it over again. So why are you going through all of this? What's the danger in not getting it right?
Well, at the end of the day, it's a business, and the business has its vision and it has its mission. So you want to be productive and you want to have customer satisfaction. So that's the main impact there. If you don't find the right fit for the role, it could be damaging to the company's reputation, depending on who that person is interacting with. And it can also be damaging to the productivity of the business. So you're looking at all those things and you're trying to make sure that you kind of isolate it and you find the person that is the best fit, much like dating and looking for a life partner. You're looking for somebody to partner with your company in order to help achieve the goals of the organization and to ensure that your customers are going to be given the best service possible and they're going to be satisfied.
I want to look at this whole concept of onboarding. What is that about as it relates to recruitment?
So the onboarding process speaks to the actual act of bringing the person into the organization. So you offer the person a role they've decided to accept. So from there, how do you integrate that person into your organization? So usually people will be familiar with having an orientation where you get a little insight into what the company does, what could be expected of you, and from that process on, that entails the onboarding. And what we've seen is that onboarding, the typical rule is about 3 months. However, research has shown that if we extend that onboarding process to about a year, that it has a more positive impact, and that it can actually help to increase the retention of staff because it gives people more time to adapt to the work culture. It gives them that sense of feeling of belonging because they feel seen and heard throughout the process because you're checking in with them for that full year of them being there. It also allows time for them to essentially learn more because it's not a lot of information at one time, but instead you've kind of made a plan for them and you're kind of gradually introducing them into new information, which has higher learning capabilities and higher retention in terms of the knowledge. So it's kind of a extended process that you should be looking at so that you kind of improve your retention because onboarding has been found to be like the second most influential element as it relates to being able to retain staff.
Is that like probation? That's what I'm hearing in my ears. You know, you hear you have a 3-month probation period at the end of which you'll be reviewed, and and so on and so forth. Now you're suggesting that there's that period known as onboarding, where I'm exposed to everything, and hopefully at the end of which I can decide, whether I like this or not. And with that, we begin a long-term journey, one way or the other. So is it similar to what we call probation?
Well, the probationary period it varies from company to company. It varies between 3 months to 6 months. And that is essentially like a testing ground for how you perform over 3 months. You said you can do this. We see those things that indicate that you can probably do the job, but let's just make sure. So it's almost like a trial at the end of which the employer or the employee can decide that they're going to walk away from the relationship because it's not what they're looking for. But in terms of onboarding may encompass the probationary period, but it essentially speaks to how do we integrate you into our organization. So we don't want to just hire you and then just throw you into the deep end.
Mm-hmm.
We want to check on you. We want to make sure that we're focusing on your development for over a period of a year and that you're settling into the organization well.
Shane, a lot of this has a lot to do, to my mind, to how we ask for we invite people to apply. Oftentimes you see a job advertisement in the paper or somewhere and it's so vague. It is like, okay, what is it exactly that I'm applying for? But you know what? I'm looking for a job. I think I have some of the things that you're asking for. I'll apply. And then you stumble across some people and it makes you feel at times that you're wasting your time. So how do we get it right from advertising right the way through to recruitment?
Okay. So again, it goes back to the whole idea of design and being really intentional about what you want. I would say, unfortunately, that we as a business persons, because it could be HR professionals, as in trained professionals, and oftentimes in a lot of organizations, because when an organization might be smaller, they may not be able to afford to have a dedicated resource that is fully trained in HR. So unfortunately, we do see situations, and again, I'm not going to excuse it and say that it isn't from practitioners as well, but situations where you can see from the ad that they're not 100% clear, that the design of the role has not necessarily matured to a point where it gives a sense of what the employer may want, and that kind of nebulous vacancy ad, which is reflective of a nebulous job description, may sometimes, not always, be indicative of further challenges down the line when the person actually gets into the organization, because the business has not properly articulated what it is that they want. And it just kind of takes me back to a question that you asked Khadijah not long ago, which is ultimately this whole hiring process is one around risk management.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. When we think risk management, we oftentimes think of it from a financial standpoint. One of the biggest risks in any organization is people. That is whether they deliver poor service, as Khadijah would have said, is that there are accidents because they're not, following a procedure or protocol correctly, and it then becomes unsafe. Whether or not that person's brand is not necessarily the kind of brand that the company wants to associate with, so there's reputational risk. And all of these things, if we really pay attention and look at it from that standpoint, we're trying to manage the risk in the business. and you look at it then in trying to communicate that from the vacancy ad, having looked at it internally to see, what is it that we want and what we need, then you're better able to manage your risk because the types of persons that you want know this is the role for me, and equally the types of persons that it is not well suited for can kind of deselect and say, you know what, that isn't the culture, that isn't the environment, that isn't the role that I will be able to perform my best at. And ultimately, I think we're looking at it from the business perspective. I want persons listening, employees, to recognize this is about protecting them as well. If they are turning over from jobs all the time, it is reputational risk for them going forward. So all of this is ultimately protecting both sides, both players in the
Right.
relationship.
Listen, so folks, if you're a potential employer or potential employee and you feel like throw your hands in the air, don't do that. There's an organization that can help you with that right now. It's called HRMAB, HRMAB, and you can find them online, hrmab.org.bb. Call them up, check them out, and let's see if we can help you navigate your recruitment process. It can either make or break your organization. So that's that risk that you're managing all the time when it relates to people as well. So do get in contact with HRMAB, hrmab.org.bb, and let the professionals help you where that's concerned as well. There's membership, and membership comes with all sorts of benefits as well. So do become a member of HRMAB if you can and benefit from the wisdom from that collective as well. Thank you so much, Shane Howell and Kadisha Haynes, for joining us this morning, because I believe recruitment is a critical a tool that we need to get right as it relates to business. Thank you very much for joining us this morning.
Thanks again, Pearson.
You're very welcome.
Morning, morning, morning. Good morning.